Everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kathy Sheffers, and I am on the marketing team at Goodheart-Willcox. I am joined by my colleague, Rhonda Dearborn, who is the acquisitions editor for early childhood education at GW. We are both thrilled to have Carol LaLiberte with us today. Carol is the author of The Developing Teacher, Guiding Students from Practicum to Profession, and she will be giving us a firsthand look into this great resource. First, a few housekeeping notes for you. You are in listen-only mode, but we definitely want to hear from you throughout today's session. Please use the chat box and the question box to provide any feedback and ask questions. And we'll definitely have time at the end of the webinar for a quick Q&A. So please go ahead and use that chat box as much as you'd like during the session. I'm really happy to share some wonderful information about our presenter today, Carol LaLiberte. Carol currently oversees and teaches in both the early childhood education and human services programs at Connecticut State Community College at the Asnuntuck campus. She teaches the capstone course, Student Teaching Practicum, which really helps for today's session. She's also an adjunct faculty member at Westfield State University in the psychology department. Carol was honored to earn the Exceptional Master Leader Award in 2015 from Exchange for Childcare, as well as the Connecticut Board of Regents Faculty Teaching Award. In 2019, she was awarded the Children's Champion Award from KITE, the Early Childhood Collaborative in Enfield. And in 2023, she earned the Distinguished Faculty Award for her dedication to teaching. Carol was instrumental in policy and program development in the state of Connecticut as head of the Children's Trust Fund through the Department of Children and Families, created to prevent child abuse and neglect. She has published widely on topics related to children and families. She was a regular contributor to the Council for Professional Recognition's blog and served as a professional development specialist for CDA candidates. She has been a consulting editor for NACY's Young Children, and she's authored articles for Exchange Press. Her work is defined by teaching, learning, and writing, and she has interfaced with young children and families in a variety of settings and roles. She was a Head Start family advocate, home visitor, preschool teacher, and administrator. So wonderful resume, Carol. We're so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful. I'm going to just give you a quick overview about The Developing Teacher, and then Carol will dive in and give us a lot of great information about the book and ways that you all would be able to use it in your program. As you can imagine, The Developing Teacher is written for future educators who are seeking to teach children 0 to 8 years of age. It's designed for that final semester practicum course for early childhood education. And this text acts as a manual for students to write in, and it will give guidance for the student teaching practicum. The text supports all the practices of a good student teaching experience, including synthesizing and applying prior knowledge, self-reflection, personalization, student-specific information, and relevant and current topics. It follows the flow of a student teaching course, and the developing teacher then guides student teachers to apply what they have learned in previous courses to their classroom experience. Practical topics inform student teachers about professionalism and workplace roles in and outside the classroom. Most importantly, the text takes a reflective approach to all major topics so students can determine the kind of teacher that they want to be. So Carol, the preface of your book begins with this wonderful quote by John Dewey. We do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. I love that quote. And we're hoping you could share with our audience maybe some, the importance of that quote to you and how it applies to the overall purpose of your book.
Absolutely. So welcome, everyone. I'm happy to be here and to share with you about the journey of writing this book and my own using it, teaching the Practicum course. I was finding that in the text that I was using, there wasn't space for reflection. And I certainly built that into my classes, but the difference is in this text, it is literally built in with spaces for students to reflect after we cover some content area. And it's only through that reflection, right, that we begin to grow in all the things that we do. And we begin to refine our practice as teachers when we learn what works, what doesn't work, under what circumstances. And so this text really offers an opportunity for us as professors, as instructors, to open up this teachable moment for students and allow their voices to be centered in all of this. And I have found that it has changed both their reaction when they open the text to the course. It's very different from what they're used to, and it has changed my approach in that, again, I'm inviting them in, and every time I teach this, it goes in a little bit of a different direction depending on student voice.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Carol. You said your book was developed with these 3 underlying principles. Can you share the importance of these principles and how they benefit students and instructors?
Absolutely. So again, I was finding that the text that I was using before this book often retaught theories that students had in prior courses. And I was, seeing reactions from students like, oh, not again. So the approach that I used was reminding students of what they learned, but then asking them about what they recall in student teaching practicum, so that together we can fill in the blanks. And it's amazing when we work together in our classes how some students remember very clearly things that they've learned that they're going to use in student teaching, and others don't, because we all learn differently, right? And we all remember things that have meaning for us at the time. So to go from text to practitioner's manual, again, where they are reflecting and they are remembering back to all of the things that have led to this course, allows them to, kind of be in the driver's seat. And so what I really love about it is it creates this parallel process, right? So that we know what we want students to do in the field. We know that we want them to observe before they ever teach, understand children's interests, understand where children are successful in certain areas and may need some scaffolding to get them there. This is exactly the process that we use in student teaching that models that. So we're actually showing them the kinds of things that we want them to do in the classroom in their practicum. So we're inviting them in, we're asking them to recall, we're asking them where are the blanks or the spaces that you don't know, the things that you don't know, and how do we together journey and fill that in. So that's the part that I love, is sometimes halfway through the course, they'll say, this is exactly what we're doing in the field. They get that this is intentional in the way that we're presenting this very valuable and important information right before they're ready to launch right into the field. And some are working in the field and able to use some of this immediately as they're taking the course.
That's wonderful. That's great.
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Now I can.
Oh, okay. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah, sure.
You talked about it, the text being more like a manual, and that your students, might be a little surprised at how it's formatted. And you mentioned that's very deliberate. Can you share with us some best practices for the different ways that your students and how other instructors would use your book with the format that it's in?
Sure. So I used it last year. I had a student who decided against my better guidance that he wanted to rent the book. And so if he's renting it, instead of writing right in it, he chose to, write in a notebook, and he was able to align that well and refer back and still participate. But at the end of the semester, he said, I understand now, and I really wish I had bought the book, because now it would be filled with all of this reflection and my notes and my questions about things. Also, I just want to share this tale of 2 classes. So last semester, again, there's spaces where students, I had assigned some writing in chapters, and I was noticing they were coming in, they had not filled, no surprise to all of us who teach, right? They weren't filling that in ahead of time. So I said, geez, this was meant to be homework. How are we going to get to this place where we are kind of filling in what needs to be put in the chapter so that we have a complete picture? And one of them said, well, can we do it in class together? So together, that's how we went through the chapters. So fast forward to this semester, I opened up my first class by saying, let's look at the text. And I always give a tour of the text because, again, it is quite different. And students really get some buy-in that very first class when they're like, wow, this really is different from what they're used to. So I said, how do you want to fill in those reflective pieces? Do you want to do that as homework, or do you want to do that together in class? Now, this group said, we want to do that as homework so we can get to just discussing it when we all come to class. So again, students are all obviously very unique in their approaches. And so that was a little check for me to always check in with them. You know, we want your voice in this. How are we going to get that? What's the best way for this class to do that? Is it working with a partner? Is it working in small groups? Is it, you know, all together? So again, it just reminds me how much even this book, as much as I thought I individualized it, the approach can be adapted to various styles of learning in various classes as they need it to be.
Absolutely. And when Carol told me the story about the young man who had rented the book and then kind of, you know, was disappointed because he saw such, you know, that it could have been almost a keepsake. And you think of these new young teachers just starting out to be able to look back on their first teaching experience in a practicum course, how neat to look back years later to see, you know, how they've grown and changed in their career. So I loved that story, Carol, and thanks for sharing that.
Sure. I just want to add too that because the text is broken up with places and spaces to reflect, my students are reading it, and I often now, many of my students do not read text. They'll go in and find an answer and jump right back out, right? They get what they need, and that's kind of their approach. And so rather than reading a text, a full chapter, because when they open up the book, it is broken up, it doesn't seem so overwhelming. It doesn't seem like, oh, I have 35 pages to read for homework. Instead, it's like sections, and then they're putting their input in. So I think that I didn't even realize that visually sends them a different message as well.
Excellent point. If you can get students to read nowadays, you've done a miracle, right? That's awesome. So Carol had 29 wonderful reviewers from 20 different states across the country who provided their valuable input and feedback in the development of the developing teacher. We just wanted to give them a little shout out today. We really always appreciate their time and their expertise, and wanted to let you all know who are on the call. If you're ever interested in serving as a reviewer for any forthcoming titles or new editions, we would love to invite you in. Rhonda, as I mentioned, is on the call. She's our acquisitions editor. So even if you wanted to put it in the chat that you're interested, we'd love to participate with you. I know some of you already put that in your registration form. So if you did, we'll definitely be reaching out to you as well. No pressure, of course, but happy to have you participate. So as you know, the developing teacher aligns with NAEYC and DAP standards to support educators who are teaching to these standards. The NAEYC chart that is in the textbook is intended to help students and instructors easily see the correlations between chapter content and the professionally recognized standards and practices from NAEYC. This chart here is the NAEYC, and then here are the developmentally appropriate practices. And you'll see in a few slides ahead how we call out these standards in Carol's textbooks in each chapter. And the online textbook, if you or your students use that, the chapters are hyperlinked, so you can go right to the chapter where those specific standards are covered. So try to make it as user-friendly as possible for all of you. And then here is the brief table of contents. And I was hoping, Carol, if you want to share some insight into how you organize the book and how instructors and students would work through the content.
Absolutely. So it is shorter than many other student teaching texts that I have used on purpose, because 10 chapters, in my class, we cover a chapter a week, but the semester is 14 or 15 weeks long. But I have a lot of information they need to onboard into their practicum placement. So that allows it allows weeks where you are able to bring in certain things that you want to make sure that you cover, so you're able to individualize it to your needs. By the end, by chapter 10, they have written a philosophy of education. They have prepared and created their resume. They have often signed up for some national early childhood newsletters that may be free that are important as professionals. They are looking at transfer or employment or both. And so they're not just ending a course, they're truly ready to launch, having gone through all of these so important things. And I just want to highlight, so for instance, just an example in chapter 3, oftentimes my students, they do fairly well with working with young children. We've prepared them well. And yet they struggle with being in this kind of in-between role. We call them, the guest in the classroom, right? They're not really part of the teaching team because they're only there a short time. And yet they kind of straddle the student and teacher role while they're there. So we spend some time talking about that and what to do if you have concerns about anything in the teaching team, and how to enter into the teaching team relationship and how teams are built. So again, I've tried to focus on areas where my students had brought forth in prior years struggles and challenges that they had had. And certainly we want them to focus on intentional teaching and planning, and not just doing themes that have been done every year, but to look at the individual children in their care, and that they are educating so that they can individualize their lessons. I think a really important component of this is the homeschool community. I think we do a great job in early childhood preparing students to work with children, and hopefully not, but sometimes as an afterthought, the homeschool community. So I think it's important for them to understand their role with families, and to begin to dip their toe in the water with having conversations with parents and understanding the value of having that home team working with you towards the goals for that child.
Awesome. So here is a chapter opener from chapter 6. It contains a list of learning outcomes and a list of key terms, as you can see there. Of course, learning outcomes clearly identify the knowledge and skills to be gained when the chapter is completed, and the key terms list the key words to be learned in the chapter. And as you can see there, the NAEYC and DAP standards are called out at the beginning of each chapter. Carol, do you want to talk a little bit more about any of those components?
I just want to talk about the start of every chapter. So we start with something called stories from the field, and my students love this. It's some story about a student teacher and an experience that they're having. All the stories are real. Obviously, names have been changed, and students, react to whatever the story is. Maybe providing guidance for that student teacher, or have you ever felt this way in your practicum? I'm learning that this is a wonderful way to begin class, because this warms up the group to what we're going to be talking to. The stories from the field, reflect some information or some concepts from the chapter that lie ahead. And it gets us chatting and interacting from, whatever the end of their day was into class. And the next section after that is what they affectionately refer to, my students, as EBQs, right? Essential brainstorming questions. So again, we're asking them, let's think about, some of the things that we're going to talk about in this chapter. What are a few questions you might have? So now we're having them do some purposeful reading, right? With the essential brainstorming questions, they're wondering, they're being curious about, and then they're reading to try to find those answers. Will their questions be answered in this chapter? And if not, can we bring that back to talking about it in class to make sure that it is addressed? But again, we do this, they do this when they're reading with young children, during group time. They want to read in a purposeful way. So they're going to introduce the book and kind of ask, what do you think is going to happen? And let's find out. So it goes back to the parallel process of we're modeling in the college classroom the kinds of things we want them to do with the learners they're working with.
That's awesome. I'm going to go back a couple slides here real quick. As we looked at the start of the chapter, I just wanted to call out for anybody who's interested in including the online content with your students. As you see there in that top box where we have the key terms, there's the little arrow icon that takes them right to the sheet where you see there, welcome to student teaching. And it gives them all these different activities that they can do on their own. You can do them as a class. You know, they're very flexible. There's the digital flashcards, so students can practice those key terms. They flip back and forth. They can do all sorts of ways of using those flashcards. They can delete it when they know they've comprehended the word and want to narrow it down to just what they still need to learn. There's that Jeopardy style vocabulary game that you see there where there's points. I've heard of a lot of instructors in all different disciplines using this game in the classroom, and just kind of quizzing the kids in a fun way about the key terms that are in that specific chapter. And then all of the questions that are in the textbook are available in DocX files so that you can assign them to your students if you'd like. So chapter by chapter, there's a list of questions that you're able to assign to your students. And Carol, I don't know if you want to add anything more about the questions or the assessment side of it.
Just that, again, that can be tackled different ways too. They can be brought up in discussion. They can be, filled out for homework. They can be done in class. It just can be done. The content can be addressed in a lot of different ways. Perfect.
I love that. And then there's reflection questions included at the end of each section of each chapter. And these allow instructors and students to reflect on the chapter content and to discuss it with their classmates and with each other. And Carol, I love these reflection questions because it reminds me of the quote we talked about at the beginning about learning from reflecting on experience. Do you want to talk a little bit more about how these reflection questions fit into the game plan?
Yeah, and again, and not just learning concepts, but how does it apply to you? So, I don't know if I'd say many, but some of my students haven't had the best experiences in school. Some of them perhaps are working in a place where they're not necessarily seeing best practices all the time. So this reflection allows for kind of, digesting, well, what's the difference here between what I experienced and what I'm seeing in my practicum, or what I'm seeing in my job and what I'm seeing in my practicum? So being able to not only talk about the student teaching experience, but their own experience as children. Like, I'm looking at the last one, think back to what you reflected on for your favorite and least favorite teachers, and then what was that teacher's philosophy or belief about children, so going back and kind of acknowledging and honoring their own unique lived experiences and what we bring to practicum has been an important part. I think it has given some richness to the classroom discussions. And the text, again, has this. You don't have to think up those questions. It has a lot of them that, you may have them talk with each other about or do in a whole class environment. But it does cause them to think about things a little bit differently.
Wonderful. And then end of chapter material at the end of each chapter provides an opportunity for review and application of concepts. I have this next slide where each of the sections are blown up to see a little bit better, but you can see that there's a mini glossary that allows students to quickly reference those key terms found in the chapter, so they have opportunity to review those again. There's a concise summary that provides an additional review tool and reinforces those key learning objectives. And as you can see there, that the summary has the same section heads in the left column there. So it's organized by the sections of the chapter. So it's easy if they want to go back and reference the specific points, they know exactly where to go in the chapter. There's a let's apply this. They're questions that extend learning and develop student abilities to use that learned material in new situations and to break down material into its component parts. And then there's a take a deeper dive section that lists resources that provide additional learning for the chapter. So that's at the end of every chapter. You can count on having each of those sections called out.
And I love those because you can assign a taking a deeper dive. You may take a couple of those and assign it as sort of a final project that students work on. You can decide to do the let's apply this together, or you can skip both of those. It has to, to work for you. But I have found that allowing them to do one let's apply this and, then something that they choose from the taking a deeper dive helps the learning to go in the direction that they're most interested in. And again, they vary. So sometimes it might be a video, it might be a TED Talk, it might be, something that you can put on at the end of the chapter and say, let's talk about everything that we've learned in this chapter as it applies to this podcast or whatever it is that you're seeing. So I like it. I like to lean on that a little bit to spend some time with the content.
That's awesome. And then we hear a lot of great feedback from instructors who are excited that Carol's book also includes 29 video clips. Speaking of sharing in the class and be able to have discussions around these videos. What's neat about the videos is they are authentic. They were shot in real learning environments. They're not something you're going to find anywhere else. These specific videos. This is original content that we share with you to be able to share with your students. They're examples of daily occurrences that an early childhood educator might experience and really provide students with that front row seat to learning experiences and those key ECE concepts as they occurred in these real learning environments. As part of the videos, there are guided worksheets that are included to make the videos a relevant teaching and learning experience, and those allow students to review and evaluate the video clips. So there's the 29 videos along with the guided worksheets that go together, and it's a really wonderful value-added benefit of utilizing the online options available with the developing teacher to think of having all of these right at your disposal. And then also, hopefully you all know that when you adopt the developing teacher or any of our early childhood education resources, you have access to free online instructor resources that are specially created for you, hoping to save you some time and make it easier for you to prepare for class, reinforce new concepts, assess the learning, and they're ready to go for you. Part of the instructor resources are these instructional strategies that you're able to read through, and as Carol's mentioned, take what you want from it, forget some of it, remember, use whatever is important for you. But as you plan your instruction, you might also want to keep some of the points in mind that are there, helping students develop critical thinking skills, problem solving and decision-making skills, recognizing and valuing diversity, supporting reading, and strategies for various abilities and learning styles. So I think especially for a brand new teacher, it might be helpful to have some of these instructional strategies at hand, but they're there for you to use in your instructional resources.
I think these resources, Kathy, are so helpful without feeling overwhelming to the student.
Wonderful, wonderful. And then for our educators, there are rubrics available to help you evaluate individual participation as well as group participation. Carol, I don't know if you want to talk at all about rubrics or how those might be used. I thought it was neat that it's for individual as well as group participation, because it sounds like even in your class, there are a lot of both individual and group activities.
Yeah. And again, as I'm sure we all have come up with our own rubrics, it takes time. So to have this available is very helpful.
Wonderful. And then another part of the online instructor resources for any of you that are teaching to the NAEYC standards, we mentioned how the content is aligned to those NAEYC standards, and we provide you these correlation charts that list all of the NAEYC standards in the left column, and then the page numbers of Carol's books where those standards are addressed. So just a guideline for you for both the NAEYC standards and then also the developmentally appropriate practice position statement. So those are just more resources. If you need them, just know that those are available for you. And then I just pulled this information from our website at g-w.com. This is the pricing and ISBN information for Carol's book. And I really like to show the pricing structure. As you see, the textbook has a retail price of $60. And if you look at the bottom line there, the bundle is the textbook plus all the online resources. So it's those e-flashcards, the Jeopardy game, all the videos that are included, is just $4.32 more to purchase the bundle. So I definitely would encourage people to take a look at that. It's not a big extra cost to be able to utilize all of those online features. So as you're considering the book, it might be something you'd want to look into and potentially decide to use if those online resources would be important to you and your students. And then here, I wanted to just give you some more information about some next steps. If you have any questions or need more information, you have a GW educational consultant in your area who's super happy to help you answer questions, provide you with review samples. If you'd like an online demo of any of our resources, they are so helpful, a great group of people that would be able to get you whatever you need. You can also go specifically to Carol's product page on our website to learn more about her textbook. And then from that site, you can request an online sample, or you can go directly to g-w.com/preview and select Carol's book, as well as any other ECE titles you might be interested in. And then we also have Carol's email address on the screen here for any of you who would love to ask her a question or connect with Carol going forward. I know collaboration is huge among educators, so if you had any thoughts or questions or things you'd like to chat with Carol about, Carol, thank you for being available to everybody through email. That's wonderful.
I would love that. I would love to hear if you're using the book, how it's going, what's working, what you wish would be different. That will help my classes, and it'll help me when I'm able to share with other instructors how to use the book, but your feedback is very important to me.
Awesome. And then finally, just a quick overview. GW has a strong commitment to early childhood education, and we are so happy to support you with this growing list of titles for your courses. All of our titles do share some common themes where we really work on balancing theory with application to really help prepare students for the workplace. They're all designed specifically for early childhood education, so they really focus on that space. And really for your students who are focusing on that space, it's a perfect partnership there. The content really reflects actual experiences so that students really can learn from the textbook and then apply it in their classrooms one day. They all emphasize culturally responsive mindsets, and as I mentioned, they're aligned with the NAEYC and DAP standards. We have 2 new titles that will be available in the next year or so. I wanted to just give a call out to that. We have Exceptional Young Children in Early Childhood Education and Introduction, and also Guiding Young Children, a Proactive Approach. So look for those coming soon. Your educational consultant will be sending you more information as new information comes out on both of those titles, but just wanted to let you know as we're here today about what's next on the horizon for ECE from GW. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we would love for you to engage with us in different ways. If you'd like to do content reviews, digital reviews, become an author like Carol, subject matter experts, be on an advisory board, or participate in focus groups, there's all sorts of ways to get involved with GW, and we'd love to have you. And I have a link there, and I'll be sharing that with everybody in a follow-up message. But if you go to the Engage with Us page on our website, you will find out the information there. And I told you I'm on the marketing team, so I couldn't have a presentation without sharing our social media icons with you. If you'd like to connect with us on any of these different platforms, we would love to have it. And we often will share about new products coming out or conferences that we're going to be at or opportunities to grow with us. So if you'd like to follow us on any of those platforms, please do. And finally, we have time for some questions. So Rhonda, I'll turn it to you to see if there's any questions.
We did have a question, Kathy, about compatible LMSs. Ethel had put forward, what are the compatible online platforms that can be used with this book? I'm assuming, Ethel, you're asking about learning management systems. So Kathy, take it away.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you, Ethel, for that question. And yes, we have common cartridges that integrate with Canvas, Blackboard, Moodle, D2L, hopefully I mentioned one of yours. There's some others. Basically, any platform that's LTI compliant is the technical word for them. We would connect very easily for those systems. Hopefully that answers your question, Ethel. Feel free to ask a follow-up if you need it.
She confirmed that's what she was asking. And then Heather and I, the editor for Early Childhood Education, were chatting in the comments amongst each other about one of the things that you highlighted about all the new products that we've published in the last couple of years, one of which is the video series. And some of the videos, as you've highlighted wonderfully in this presentation, have been tagged to Carol's book. And there are worksheets available. If you were to do the little bundle, the student would have access to those videos alongside the worksheet. But we also wanted to highlight, if you go back a slide or two, Kathy, where you showed all the great products that we have available and what's coming, the video series, if you want to say a couple of words about the standalone ECE video series that is available.
Yes, thank you. Excellent point. So yes, as we talked about with Carol's book, there's 29 videos that are specific to the Practicum course and what students would be learning alongside Carol's content. Each of our books have those same types of videos that are specific to the course. But for some of you who maybe are using, just your students are only using the print books and aren't going to be using the online content, we also offer a video library that incorporates over 120, I think, videos across all the different areas. So that's another option if you'd like to include video in your teaching. There's a separate video library that can be purchased. It's on our website. There's a specific ISBN for that as well.
That's excellent. So we did get a question from Yasmin, and I followed up with her. She's asking this. She wanted to see an example of the write-in sections, right? The write-in sections that the student can reflect on their own experience, and that's what makes this so valuable as a solution for you. She said she was interested in seeing what students are doing in the text. Also, as a vocational high school, would you find it appropriate for that age as the experience to reflect is at preschool level with many restrictions in place as we are a lab school? So that's a little bit of a twist, Carol.
Yeah, I think that it could be adapted and used in a variety of settings. I had just heard that directors who have employees in their childcare centers who have earned a CDA or earning a CDA are using the topics and the reflections in their professional development sessions. So that was, again, another use that I hadn't even considered. But I definitely think that if someone's in a lab school, much of this would be applicable for sure.
Thank you.
So you can see this, again, there's reflective components throughout the whole chapter, but this is from the beginning of the chapter, the stories from the field. So, there's a little story, and then what's your initial reaction to, this student's social studies lesson for preschoolers. And, I always say that it's you'll probably hate me for this, Kathy and Rhonda, but that it's easier to be an editor than a writer because, it's somewhat easier to see what someone else is doing incorrectly than your own, mistakes. And so that's the other piece, that stories from the field sort of, students are eager to point out, oh yeah, there's no way that this student teacher should have done this kind of lesson for this preschooler or whatever it is. And then those conversations go on from there, and those discussions and get more and more in depth. So they're reflecting on various things, but it's very tied to whatever the content is from that chapter. So you'll see number 3, based on what you learned in chapter 5, is this lesson intentional? If so, which criteria does it meet? If not, which criteria did it not meet? So, again, I'm pulling in the content, but in a way that includes their voice as well. Did that answer your question?
She said, thank you, looks great.
Okay, great. And don't hesitate to, again, if questions come up after this, to email me. I'm happy to, get back to you and give you more examples if that's what you need.
Yeah, and I just want to interject that at conference at NACCE, we've had folks who represent Head Start, who represent owners of centers who come up to us. We've got 5 sites. We would love this particular book for training purposes, for new staff. So if you do place students in centers or other locations, lab schools, etc., and they're looking for something like this, you might recommend it to them as well, because it's been something that people are interested in utilizing in those environments for new employees or training purposes, et cetera.
Yes, absolutely. As Carol mentioned, we talked to some directors who said that the teachers didn't ever have a practicum course as part of their state didn't require it. And they would love for a first-year student to reflect on their first year of teaching using Carol's book that way. So yeah, it sounds, very flexible the way it's been put together. It's nice
Yeah,
to hear
and then
it
I
being
think
received that way.
Yasmin actually said, great idea. Maybe our cooperative sites could use this to help us. So yeah, spread the word. It's really a unique solution. And we do know that there aren't that many solutions available for the practicum for early childhood education, and some of them that are out there aren't updated. So this is quite unique, updated, mapping to NAEYC standards. And again, you have access to your sales representatives, our marketing and editorial folks, and most importantly, to Carol herself for questions. That concludes the questions, Kathy and Carol.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you all for being with us today. We just love all getting together and to share this information with you and to hear your feedback. And as Carol mentioned, keep that feedback coming through her email. We'll share this slide deck with all of you so that you have access to all the links and things that we put into the presentation. So know that that will be coming. And we'll also send the recording from today's session to you, so that if you wanted to even share that recording with other colleagues who couldn't be there, it's certainly available for you. I'll let Carol have the last word and send us off for the day.
I just want to acknowledge that it can be really time consuming to review new texts and select them. And I have been so happy with the GW text. It was a colleague who first said, try this child development text. And I fell in love with child development again because of the way that it was written and my students were engaged in it. So I would I just want to give a shout out to all of the early childhood texts. They are grounded in the real work that students are doing. They don't lose that emphasis within theory, but it's a balanced approach. And again, students are responding, and that's really the most important part. But I am just so thankful that you're here to be able to walk through this text, and hope that you use it and hope that you enjoy using it and that your students do as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Carol, so much for the time. And thank you, Rhonda. And thank you, everyone, for being here. Have a great rest of the day.